What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Justin Jones. Whether I'm hitting the trails, training for an ultramarathon, or pushing my limits in the gym strength training, I've always been fascinated by what drives us to perform at our best. This podcast is for everyone, from the serious endurance, strength, or hybrid athlete to the outdoor enthusiast who wants to live life to the fullest. I believe that peak performance is an assembly of physical training, mental fortitude, emotional health, and social support. Whether you're training for a sport or viewing life itself as the ultimate athletic event, join me in redefining limits and living a life full of challenges and adventure. Let's get into today's podcast. Hi, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today we have Dr. Annie Hughes on the podcast. She's a physical therapist and a strength coach. She specializes in pelvic floor rehab, as well as pre and postnatal rehab and coaching. She is passionate about teaching women the importance of lifting weights, not only for life, but throughout pregnancy, and also being a resource for women through the postpartum journey. How's it going?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. I'm excited to talk. I have a almost 8-month-old now, and I've been learning a
Congratulations.
ton about, thank you. I've been learning a ton about pelvic floor health. And obviously my wife is, 8 months postpartum. So I'm super interested to talk to you. And surprisingly, the education, the mainstream education around this stuff is super lacking from at least my experience. And so it's been very interesting to kind of learn. My wife went to go see a local pelvic floor PT when she got pregnant. And so that's been a super interesting journey to work through. So I'm really excited to pick your brain, as I know that you're a very movement positive strength coach as well, on top of being a PT.
Yes, for sure.
Just a little background for me. My introduction to pelvic floor health was really by accident on a podcast. I was listening to a running podcast, and there was a woman on that ran, and she just mentioned in passing how a lot of these problems that women runners deal with, a lot of moms just deal with in general, and they say, oh, this happens after you have kids. And she was like, I learned that wasn't normal, and that kind of stuck in my brain. That was years ago, before I was even a coach, and that just stuck in my brain. And I was like, one day, I'm gonna be a parent, so maybe I should keep this in the back of my head from, my wife. And then that actually did come up when she got pregnant. I was like, hey, maybe you should look into seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist. And it was actually super great for her. She hasn't had any of those problems. And so, I'm really lucky that I just tuned into that podcast. But I was so surprised that, she didn't know about it. Obviously, I didn't know about it. And most of the people she talks to and the other moms, have no idea about it.
Yeah, so definitely there's some kind of disconnect between, I don't know, the medical field and kind of like the information that's getting out to women that, have had kids. Maybe they haven't had kids. Maybe they are just having pelvic floor symptoms, like you said, like running or any kind of activity that they may be doing, and they just don't know what to do. You hear kind of like what you said that, oh, I've had kids, like, I peed a little bit. Oops, like I've had kids, but it's not normal. Like, while it's common, it doesn't have to be the norm, and it's not the norm. You shouldn't be having or dealing with those symptoms, even years after giving birth. And unfortunately, a lot of women just don't know that there are resources, that there are medical professionals that are out there that can help them. And, they're not getting referred to physical therapists as well. So there's a huge disconnect, and it's really unfortunate. And I'm glad that I'm able to be in this space to help those women and hopefully, get the word out that, hey, you're dealing with this, even if it's been years, even if it's, whatever your situation, there is help and there is something that can be done.
Yeah. So before we get in the weeds, I'm sure a lot of people don't even know, they've heard pelvic floor. They don't even know what it is. I've done a ton of research. And if you were to just ask me, hey, what's the pelvic floor? I'd be like, well, it's kind of here, you know? So for people that might not have any idea what the pelvic floor is, can you explain what it is and the role it plays?
Yes. So the pelvic floor is a group of muscles. It's kind of like your core canister. So think of like the bottom of your pelvis, which is the bottom of the canister. And then you have your abdominal walls, including, your obliques, your back muscles, and then obviously the muscles in the front. And then you have the diaphragm that sits on the top. So all of that is considered, your core canister, with the pelvic floor being the bottom of it. Men have pelvic floor muscles. Men also have issues with pelvic floor symptoms, maybe not as common or not as spoken about as women, but definitely we all have pelvic floors, and they're just basically a group of muscles.
So you mentioned earlier about all those things that people, maybe new moms or, people that have multiple kids explain as being normal. Somebody who doesn't have kids, maybe they aren't experiencing those kind of symptoms. Can you explain the importance of focusing on good pelvic floor health?
Yes. So even if you haven't had children or have been pregnant or any of the above, you still may benefit from seeing a pelvic floor specialist. A lot of times, women that are extreme or heavy lifters, they experience symptoms like leaking, heaviness, or kind of bulging sensation in the pelvic region. And they sometimes think, again, that it's normal. Oh, I'm lifting heavy. So this is like a normal thing that happens. And to say it again, it's common, but it's not normal. And so even if you haven't gone through pregnancy or have had a child, you can still have pelvic dysfunctions and different pelvic symptoms, including things like incontinence and, like I mentioned before, heaviness, weakness, pain in that area with various activities that you do.
You kind of mentioned it before, but obviously a lot of the information that is out there in your, specific area of expertise is with women, and around pregnancy. But you kind of mentioned men have pelvic floors too. So is it equally as important for men to kind of be cognizant of pelvic floor health?
Yes. I mean, you should be cognizant and aware and taking care of your body as a whole. So that's just one part of it. And then, like I said, maybe it's not as common. I don't work a lot with men in the pelvic floor space, but definitely there are resources out there for men as well. And if they're trying to live, a holistic kind of healthy lifestyle, then the pelvic floor is definitely part of it. And you want to make sure that you're checking all your boxes. So you want to make sure that everything is in line, everything is in place. And it may not be something that you have to like consistently kind of check, but if you are having any kind of symptoms of heaviness or leaking or anything like that, then you definitely want to reach out to somebody and get that resolved.
Definitely, yeah. And we'll get into kind of how training looks around all of this and around pregnancy. But now that we've kind of established what the pelvic floor is, can you give us a little bit more background about, your journey to becoming a PT and focusing on this population?
Yes. So my journey as a physical therapist started in high school. I was a high school athlete, a little bit into college, but mostly high school. I played soccer and typical ACL, MCL kind of triad thing that happened to me. So I had ACL surgery, reconstruction, and I was in physical therapy for a long time. And I just fell in love with just the way that they were able to get me back onto the field and the way that the body recovers and all the things that I have to go through, I was just like, wow, I want to do that for other people. So fast forward, I had no idea anything about pelvic floor physical therapy. I didn't know that was a thing. No idea. Fast forward to 2 years ago, my sister has a baby and I'm a physical therapist at this point. So she's kind of reaching out to me for a lot of questions and help and guidance. So she has her baby. And afterwards, she's kind of like trying to get back into training and working out and things like that. And I asked her, I'm like, oh, so your doctor didn't prescribe pelvic floor PT, or they didn't like give you any guidance or anything? And she said no. Like she went for her 6 week checkup, and the doctor basically was just like, okay, everything looks good. You can live your life as normal. And that kind of sat with me the wrong way because I'm like, my sister obviously has me, but like not everybody has somebody that they can reach out to and be like, hey, am I doing this correctly? If I'm feeling this, like how can I modify the exercise, or how do I get back into living my daily life or my routine, like without any pain or without any like, modifications or anything. So I was very, very surprised and kind of taken aback by that. And then I started asking other people around me, other women around me, like, hey, when had your child, did they give you any guidance? Did they send you to pelvic floor? Women that I know that have had a C-section, did you guys get any after wound care, anything like that? And most of the responses were no. They had no idea how to take care of their scar. They had no idea that, they needed to do anything at all. And it was a little frustrating to me because I'm like, if you go to the doctor, if you get surgery for a shoulder or a knee, there's so much that they're giving you. They're giving you all these papers. They're giving you, go to this physical therapist, make sure you get 2 times a week, this, XYZ. And, they're making sure that you're doing everything. They give you benchmarks and kind of like a guideline as to how to get better. But you just had this either major surgery delivering a child, or you actually vaginally deliver a child and nothing, like you just go home and that's it. And so I definitely just wanted to learn more about it and be a resource to women and people that really just need the service, because it's not something that is not well known yet. So
Yeah, if we didn't we looked up for a while to find a local pelvic floor PT, and if we didn't do that, like, I would have never even known it was a thing, you know?
right.
So it really is kind of a theme on the podcast of talking about, I would say the last month or so, maybe a little bit more, of guests explaining, that difference between PT that gets you back to just able to wash yourself and go to work. And like you mentioned, hey, I want to get back to a full life without these issues. So definitely in line with like a lot of the conversations we've had. Obviously, this is very specific, and we have not had this conversation yet. So I'm super super excited about this. I'm curious. I think I read, but where'd you go to PT school at?
I went to the University of St. Augustine. They have a campus in Coral Gables here in
Nice.
Miami, so that's why. Yeah,
Was
yeah.
pelvic floor touched on much while you were there?
Not at all.
Yeah. I was
Not
wondering
at all.
because
And
go ahead.
go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
I was wondering because the pelvic floor PT my wife saw explained how she was a PT and, didn't even think about it, and then she had her own kid, and she was like, "Why is there no resources for this?" And then she dove into it herself and specialized in pelvic floor PT for that reason, and I was so surprised, that she didn't really have much visibility even as a, DPT.
Yeah, no, for sure. And like I mentioned before, I didn't even know or get into this space until my sister had a child. And you go through school and nobody mentions it. I mean, you have your specialties, orthopedics, sports, pediatrics, things like that. But definitely, unless you go to a school where maybe the professor is a pelvic floor PT, you really don't get any exposure to that.
So we've talked a lot about pelvic floor, and we're going to continue to talk about that. But how does that relate to the rest of your work with generally coaching, pre and postnatal women, and even probably excuse the ignorance, is prenatal considered during pregnancy as well? Right? Yeah. Yeah.
So prenatal would be anything before your delivery.
Right. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you explain kind of that part of what you do?
Yeah. So I also just train women that I've either been working with previously to them being pregnant, or they come to me and they say, hey, like, I haven't really trained before, but I want to get stronger so that I can go through this delivery, whether they've had their first child or their second child or however many number. So that kind of looks similar to how I would train anybody else. And then as we go along, as the trimesters progress, we may have to modify certain activities, certain exercises to accommodate for the growing of the baby. But sometimes we don't modify. So it's not like I'm, you know, trimester two, I'm going to modify squats because you're in the second trimester. No, it's very individualized. It's dependent on the person. If the person has been training with me for a while and, I kind of know how their bodies react to different things, and we kind of go on as nothing is really happening. And then we just take into consideration how they're feeling, if they're having any aches and pains or any kind of symptoms, whether it's like back pain, hip pain. A lot of times, you get pain and pressure in the abdominal region because of the growth of the belly. But if my client is not having any symptoms at all, then there's nothing that is off the table. Now, you hear that there's like these exercises are bad for you, or, continuing to train core during pregnancy, and you shouldn't do it because of the diastasis and all these things. And I think that it's really just people that either don't really know, or people that have been taught, that something is dangerous, when in reality, we should be promoting more movement. We should be educating everybody on what, diastasis is and what the actual risks are, rather than just a blanket statement. Like, you do have, while you're pregnant, you're going to worsen your diastasis, or you're going to ruin your abs post pregnancy. It's going to be harder for you to recover afterwards. And I teach my clients what that actually means and what their body is trying to tell them when they do see a coning or a separation. and then we modify and we kind of work around it, or we modify the exercise so that they feel comfortable doing what they are supposed to be doing in the workout.
Yeah, it's so interesting coming back, like, even, when you're pregnant or postpartum, like, simple things my wife, trained beforehand, and she took creatine, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I wonder if this is, something you can still do." So I
Yeah.
look it up, and, understandably, like, the research seems somewhat lacking because what pregnant woman is gonna volunteer, Like, at least
Yeah.
that's how it works
Yeah.
in my brain.
Yes. Definitely. Yeah, there's, tons of supplements out there that women take while pregnant, and creatine has generally been a safe option. I will say that maybe if you haven't taken creatine before, I would definitely say, consult your doctor to see if this is something that's going to be in line with your journey during pregnancy. But most of the time, if my client has been taking like protein powder or creatine, or I can't think of any of the other ones off the top of my head, but any of those kind of supplements, then they are usually safe to continue to do so during pregnancy. And I know for sure creatine has been something that my clients have taken, and there's been no adverse effects or anything. And obviously it's not like a clinical trial or a study, but the doctors also have been okay with them taking it. So
Yeah, definitely. It was just, I was very like, "Oh, there's not a ton of research about a lot of this stuff," which again, like, makes sense. I'm not gonna volunteer me and my, baby to do some
right.
studies, right?
Yeah.
So, you mentioned focusing on pre and postnatal rehab and coaching. When it comes to the rehab side of things, like, are you mainly focusing on rehab from, being pregnant and the things that come with that? Or do you actually have some athletes that might be rehabbing something else and trying to perform for their sport while they're going through the, prenatal and postnatal phases of life?
So kind of both. Like I mentioned, as my clients are progressing through their pregnancies, different symptoms pop on. So the most common ones I would say are like hip pain, back pain, and those are probably the top two that pop up most commonly. So we definitely get into treatment of those things, and there's different modalities, different tools that we can use to kind of alleviate some of those symptoms. And then, postpartum, whenever they are ready to come back to the gym and work out, usually I ask them how everything is going, if what they're feeling. If there's no symptoms that they're having, then we just kind of gradually get back into things. But if they are experience any kind of pelvic floor pain or any kind of like leaking or heaviness or bulging, then at that point I will perform an internal assessment. And then that'll give me just a little bit more answers to what it is that's going on. And then from there, again, there's tools that we can use to help with their symptoms. And then we kind of take what we learn in the pelvic floor assessment and take it into the exercise portion. So there's different things, bracing, there's breathing, and then different exercises that you can do to strengthen the pelvic floor to help with those symptoms.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Before we get into kind of the training more like deeper, could you explain a little bit, for somebody, maybe a woman that's not pregnant, how strength training could help them? You mentioned being passionate about, women's strength training,
Yeah.
and more women are strength training as time goes on, but it's still something that a lot of people have maybe some misunderstandings on. There's some common misconceptions about it.
Right. So, yes, strength training, lifting heavy, all of those things are going to be beneficial for you, not just now, but as we get older. So, after the age of 30, which is not old at all, but after the age of 30, we start to lose muscle mass, we start to lose bone density, our different health systems start to decline if we don't do something about it. And that's where training heavy comes in. A lot of women shy away from training heavy because they've been told that they'll get bulky or they'll start looking, too manly, or any kind of marketing gimmick, put it out there. And, unfortunately it works. And it's not their fault. It's just the information that's presented to them. They go to these like Pilates classes and yoga classes, and it's like nice and easy, and it's fun, and that's all great. Don't not do the yoga class, don't not do the Pilates class, but you have to get in heavy training because that's the only way that you're going to build muscle, that you're going to build bone density, and that you're going to keep your joints healthy. The yoga and the Pilates and the, Orange Theories and things like that, those are definitely fun, and you build that community, and you get a sense of the hard training and things like that. But at some point, you lifting 5 to 10 pound weights is not going to cut it because of the things that I mentioned before. So we need to be better at promoting movement, promoting heavy lifting, and not scaring people that, if you do a heavy deadlift, you're going to mess up your back. Or if you lift heavy weights, you're going to get arms that like look manly. Or if XYZ. So we need to do a better job at promoting the benefits outside of the physical of strength training and how that's going to help you, not just now, but long term.
Definitely, yeah. And just as some practical examples, as you age, if you are stronger, you have a easier time catching yourself if you fall, walking up and down
For
the
sure.
steps, getting up from the ground. So it's definitely super practical as we age. You mentioned the 5 to 10 pound weights. I made a note. I'm going to come back to that later because that's an interesting one. But so obviously there are a ton of health benefits to lifting in general. Lifting while pregnant, we've already kind of touched on it a little bit. While prenatal and postnatal, for the person who might not have been pregnant before, this might be the first time that pregnant. You know, it can be easy to kind of overcorrect sometimes and be a little bit more cautious than you need to be, which is understandable and completely well-meaning. But with some lack of information or somewhat contradictory information, it can be difficult to know what decision to make. Just my wife and I going over that stuff, I was like looking up studies and everything, but if I had no idea how to do any of that, I would have just been googling and reading forum posts probably, right?
Right.
So could you address maybe some of the common concerns people come to you with around strength training while during pregnancy?
Yes. A lot of the time, like I mentioned, the lifting heavy will cause an increase in diastasis recti. Continuing to strengthen your core during pregnancy will increase your risk and chances of having diastasis recti. And it may damage your abdominal muscles. I've also heard or a lot of concerns about, increasing heart rate and training heavy because their heart rate will get too high and it might hurt the baby. Or, lifting weight during pregnancy will increase the chances of you getting back pain or things like that. So those are like the most common ones that my clients kind of ask me about and that I've seen. Like you mentioned, there's tons and tons of information out there going one way and the other. So as someone who may not even know where to start, it definitely can be very confusing, very overwhelming to figure out, okay, what is right, what is wrong. Obviously they don't want to risk the baby's health. They don't want to risk their health. So there is that overwhelmingness of information. And there's a lot of providers that sway one way or the other. And I just hope that in the research that people do, they find something that works for them, you know,
Definitely.
because I can say,
So
I have my biases and I can say like, train, 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 like, let's go. But sometimes you just have to do what works for you and what is going to make you happy at the end of the day.
definitely, yeah. What comes to my mind, just thoughts that I thought of when my wife was pregnant and stuff like that, is the increase in maybe intra-abdominal pressure when maybe bracing, Valsalva,
Mhm.
lifting heavy. Does that have any impact on pelvic floor or maybe a baby growing in there?
Yeah.
I've done my own research, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. So again, there's not like a whole ton of research out there on these things because it's really hard to get subjects for this kind of study. But there is current literature out there that says that bracing while pregnant is not dangerous for you or the baby. Valsalva is also not dangerous for you or the baby. Kind of increase in intra-abdominal pressure is also not detrimental or dangerous for you or the baby. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to put everybody and do a Valsalva, you know, because maybe they're not comfortable with it or maybe they just don't know how to do it. So it really just depends on who you are, who your client is, have they done these kind of breathing strategies before, and then that kind of will tell you if they're going to be comfortable doing them while pregnant. I usually don't teach somebody about Valsalva if they haven't done the Valsalva prior. There are definitely a lot more breathing techniques that you can do to make your client comfortable and to just make myself comfortable. I'm not going to put something on somebody that they don't want to do, but definitely any of those holding your breath, Valsalva or intra-abdominal or increase in intra-abdominal pressure it's completely safe.
Yeah, that's definitely what I came to the conclusion of as well. What you said about trying to solve it if you haven't before tends to, most of the advice my wife got was, hey, if you didn't do it before, don't do it now. If you did it before, do it now. Do
Right.
you find that you have a lot of people you work with or know who maybe don't train that much until they get pregnant? Like it's the catalyst for them to start versus maybe somebody who was a serious athlete before and just continues on during pregnancy?
Yes. So I've had both of those. I've had people that come to me and they just say, I have never really trained before, but I want to be as strong as I can for my baby, for pregnancy, and then kind of for afterward. And I treat that case just like I would with anybody that comes in and says, "Hey, look, I haven't trained at all, but I want to get stronger. I want to start lifting more weights." We go through a formal assessment, medical history, all that, just to make sure that everything is safe. And obviously, they go through their doctor and get the okay from them. Even though, I have my opinions and things that I believe in, I always make sure that they consult with their OB and make sure that their doctor is giving them the okay to start training or to continue training during pregnancy, just in case there is anything that may be a contraindication or something that strength training specifically will not support the growth of the pregnancy. But when that's the case, again, we do the formal assessment and then I kind of just progressively take them through different things. We work on squats, we work on hinging, unilateral strength, upper body strength, things that you really need, not just during the pregnancy, but then also after while you're having to carry baby, breastfeeding, having to hinge over the crib to put the baby down, all these things. And I make sure that, we kind of touch everything so that they're prepared for all the things that come for afterwards too.
Yeah, that was what I was going to mention about 5 to 10 pound weights is, some women are
Yeah.
told, hey, don't lift more than this amount for the X amount of time. The whole time they're carrying a baby, picking a baby up, all that stuff. And
Right.
that baby weighs more than
Uh,
the weights you're told not to lift.
Yeah. So, and thankfully, I think that we're kind of moving in the right direction with this. I haven't had anybody come to me and say, my doctor told me not to lift more than 5 to 10 pounds during pregnancy. After pregnancy, yes, I have heard like most of the time they're telling you, don't lift 5 to 10 pounds, don't, do much. And it's like, well, what are you supposed to do when you have, a newborn and then you have a toddler that also needs attention or a toddler that needs to go in their car seat? You can't just pause your life. You know what I mean? So, and again, it also just puts fear on women. Like you're having this doctor, this medical professional that you're trusting, and they're telling you don't lift more than 5 to 10 pounds. You're not going to go Google and see, oh wait, he's right. Is he right? Like, should I not? You're going to take their word for it because that's the person that you're going to seek care. And then you just get scared. You're scared to do exactly what that person says. So then, you know, you do that for the first 6 weeks because that's what the doctor says. Go home, do nothing for 6 weeks. And then they're told at the 6 week mark, all right, you're good to go. Now you can go back and lift more than 5 to 10 pounds. And it's like, well, I haven't done anything for 6 weeks. How am I just supposed to go back to doing that? So it is a little strange because you're supposed to carry on with your life and you can't just not even the newborn, you're going to have a baby that's going to be, you know, 6 to 8 pounds when they're born, but a month later they will definitely be at least 10 pounds. So what are you supposed to do then? Not carry your child? Like,
Yeah, definitely. That was, that was what I was getting at. It's like, I can't pick up this dumbbell, but I can pick up this kid that's bigger than the dumbbell.
right.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier the lack of, we talked on it a little bit, lack of kind of support and information when you leave. This isn't necessarily the point of this podcast, but I was so surprised you left the hospital. I was like, now what? Like,
Yeah.
it's harder to adopt a dog than it is to walk out of a hospital. Like, you have a car seat. All right, you're good to go.
Yep.
I was like, what?
Yeah. And it blows my mind because when you have a C-section, you are cutting through layers and layers and layers of skin, tissue, muscle, like ligaments, things, everything. There's so many layers that you're cutting through to bring a baby out of your body. And then you get sewn up and you get told to go home and do nothing. And it's just so mind blowing because like I mentioned before, you have a surgery in your shoulder, your knee or something, and you get all this information about what to do, what not to do, how to take care of it. You get these pamphlets, you get these papers, you get told to go to PT, but then, women go and have birth and they're kind of like left in the wind. You get all this treatment prior, you have all your monthly appointments and then weekly appointments that you lead up to it. And then you have a baby and they're just like, all right, good luck. Kind of like just throwing you off the deep end. And it's a little frustrating because, you wouldn't do that with any other orthopedic surgery.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I want to be kind of careful about the way I say this, but I joke with my wife sometimes, like, man, if I wanted to not be frustrated at the medical system, I shouldn't have gotten married because I feel like not a lot of the women I know in general, it got a lot better, but generally tend to get a little bit more medically gaslit than I've ever experienced personally, or any of my male
Definitely.
friends know. But for the person who might understand, like, okay, postpartum, I get it. Like, strength training helps me rehab postpartum, but they might not be able to make sense of how does strength training help me in like labor and delivery and through that whole process. Women do this every day, and a lot of them probably don't train. So what's like the point? I will never experience pregnancy, and watching my wife go through it, she had a fairly easy one, and I was like, I would die. But I can imagine there are people that might be, why should I start training? I'm already tired. I already feel like crap. Like, what is this going to help me?
Right. So exactly what you said. I'm already tired and I feel like crap. It's going to help you with that. It's going to help you with your energy. It's going to help you with your fatigue. It's going to help mitigate any kind of symptoms that you may have. I've had a lot of clients that come to me and we train the whole pregnancy and they don't have any symptoms of back pain or hip pain or anything like that. Also, during delivery, that's such an intense and, very, very hard on the body. If you're stronger for that, you're going to recover a lot faster. You're going to recover a lot better. And you may not experience a lot of these pelvic floor symptoms or symptoms that a lot of people experience post pregnancy. You can experience them, but you may not experience them for longer because your body's just going to heal a lot faster because you're stronger to do so. It's kind of like training in everyday life. You want to be strong all the time to be able to run with your kids or run with your friends or, travel, go up the stairs, run for fun even, or play games outside. You want to be strong for your life. And, God forbid, or, something happens to you, you need to have a surgery or you get diagnosed with something. You want to be strong for that because the stronger you are, when something happens to you, the stronger you will be getting through it. And
No, definitely. I'm over here like, yeah, you gave me chills. That was solid. Dropping bombs over here. So yeah, I mean, I was so surprised. It was my first kid. I was so surprised. It's such a like intense experience, and then it's over, and you're like, man, people do this every day. You mentioned how birth is rough. My wife does say like the pelvic floor PT, but also just going in strong. She thinks I helped her a ton. She delivered fairly quickly once everything moved along. So she attributes a lot of that to have been strong going into it because she trained before, but when she got pregnant, she was really the same way you mentioned. A lot of people are where it's like, hey, I want to be as strong as I can for this,
yeah.
and it paid off. So do you see in rehab after postpartum, what's the big difference between somebody who has a C-section and somebody who doesn't? Obviously, if C-section, I would assume you have a little bit more guidance from their OB or their doctor as the PT, but what's that rehab difference look like?
So definitely with the C-section, you're dealing with the scar now. So the scar is healing. And just like any other area of the body that has gone through trauma, the skin around it tightens, the tissue underneath tightens. So you get scar tissue, you get really tightening of that area. And you really want to make sure that you work through that because our bodies move and the scar should move with the way that our bodies are moving. So a big part of what I go through with my clients, especially if they've had a C-section, is scar management, what to look for, different positions to be in to work on their scar, and then how to self-manage. So I can do things, while they're with me, but I also want to make sure that they have something to do at home as far as scar management because, they're going to be away from me much longer than I'm with them. So making sure that they have the tools that they need at home to care for their scar is going to be huge. And then from, if they've had like a vaginal delivery, at that point, we talk about did they have any tearing? How were the stitches from the tearing? How do they feel when they stand up? Is there any heaviness? Is there any pain when walking? And I also talk about that with people that have had C-section because either way, you can end up having pelvic floor dysfunction, heaviness, pain, bulging, any of those things. So we definitely just talk about what their symptoms are. How are they feeling? How does it feel to stand up to go to the bathroom? How does it feel to put clothes on? Like what are all these things feeling or looking like? Especially going back to C-section, that area tends to become really sensitive. So we talk about different ways to decrease the sensitivity in that area so that they can put, clothes on, and so they can put jeans on or leggings or anything so that they can stand up, they can stretch, they can bend over without that area being painful or sensitive. So while it's a little bit different in that regard, if they've had a C-section, I definitely just talk about all the different things that can happen, and I ask them how they feel because it's not all the same. Somebody they can have two completely similar experiences, and one can feel one way and the other can feel the other way. So it's all about making sure that they feel comfortable, that they feel okay. Obviously, the first couple days, couple weeks, they're going to be fatigued, and they're not going to know if is it fatigue or is this discomfort from something that I have going on, or is it just from birth. So definitely giving them time to kind of just adjust to what has just happened and giving them things that they can do, whether it's breathing or just gentle movement, so that they can start to feel better right away.
So when someone wants to get back into training, obviously, let's assume that there's no C-section and just assume a general, obviously it's going to differ from person to person. You have to meet them where they're at and how they're feeling. But generally, how do you get somebody back to full activity, whatever that looks like for them? We'll focus on strength training because I do have some running specific questions. But what does that process, that ramp up look like?
Yeah, so I usually start with just body weight exercises. We do things like squats, bridges. I get them in like the quad ped position. We do a lot of hip stretches, a lot of back stretches. We do kind of like your basic movement pattern, your lunges, things like that, all in body weight, just to make sure that they can tolerate. And then obviously within each of those exercises, there's progressions, regressions that you can do, sit to stand, lunging, holding on, the dead, things like that. So we play around with it. And I'm not necessarily looking for them to, get back and start sweating and it's hard and soreness and all these things. I'm just looking for them to move and to feel good. And then if they give me that, they feel good, everything was good after the last session, then we kind of ramp it up a little bit. But usually I go off of just like how they're feeling, how long it's been since they've given birth, to make sure that, if they've had a C-section, for example, is the scar healing well? Are you experiencing any kind of reopening of the scar or anything like that? Or regular birth, making sure that they're not feeling any kind of pelvic floor dysfunctions. And even if they are, there are things that we do during the process to start working on that. I don't want to stop them doing exercise because they are feeling something. It's more about modifying the exercise and making sure that they feel good doing it, rather than stopping an exercise or telling them, hey, you're maybe feeling some bulging in your pelvic region. We're not going to move. We're going to wait until that settles. There's always going to be something that they can do movement wise to start healing those areas.
So people who are postpartum, women who are postpartum have definitely a 6 week window. That's like what everybody's used to, like 6 weeks and get back to your life. So assuming, a healthy delivery and everything, how long are you looking at ramping somebody back up before they're back to full activity lifting? Because I'm going to assume it's longer than 6 weeks.
Yes. So some people wait until a 6 week checkup with their doctor, and I respect that. That's totally fine. Some people reach out to me prior, and, we kind of, again, go through these like little, like low level, not little, these low level exercises, kind of beginner, to get them at least moving before they go to their checkup. But ramping up and getting them back like 100%, it depends on the person and depends on what kind of lifting they wanna do. Do you wanna get back to CrossFit? Do you wanna get back to powerlifting? Do you wanna get back to running? Do you wanna just get back to general strengthening? But I would say within, and I don't wanna give an exact number, but
Yeah, a range. You can give a wide range.
yeah, Okay. I would say like 3 to 6 months, you're kind of back in your groove, given that you're consistent and nothing's going on. 3 to 6 months, probably back to maybe not back to where you were before pregnancy, but definitely just back into your regular routine of strength training, whatever that looks like for you.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to highlight that it is definitely longer because I know it can be hard sometimes. You intellectually know that things take a long time, but when you're in the moment, you're like,
Yeah.
man, I haven't, like, it's been a long time. I feel like behind when in reality,
Yeah.
you're not that far from when you give birth. 6 months isn't a
Right.
long time from something like that.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, like I said, 3 to 6 months to kind of get back into your routine, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be back to where you were before. I've seen it take a year, more than a year and a half. And then at that point, the woman may want to get pregnant again. So then it's like a whole um, cycle of that. So it's just important to meet your body where you are now and not compare yourself to where you were pre-pregnancy, not compare yourself to other people, not compare yourself to somebody else's experience because, you don't know what that person has gone through. You don't know what their training style was. And even if you do know, if you're close to that person and you're like, wow, this person just like bounced right back, like the body looks great and, she's killing it in the gym and all these things. It's like, everybody's different and everybody's experience with pregnancy is different. Everybody's body's different. So the only thing that you can do is just focus on yourself and do the best that you can and look at getting better every single day, not trying to compare yourself to somebody else or to yourself prior to pregnancy. And I believe that even if you're not pregnant, if you're somebody that's trying to get into the gym and you see all these people around you like tossing all this weight, it's like, well, you don't know. Those people have been maybe lifting for years and years and years, and that's how they're able to get that to that point. But they were in your shoes at some point, a novice lifter, or a novice, athlete, or whatever activity or sport you're trying to get into, and you want to make sure that it's you versus you, and you have to just do the best you can, one step at a time, and try to get better every single day.
Yeah, yeah, and definitely, and understanding that social media too is a highlight reel at times. So somebody who just gave birth might be looking at a mother that posted some fitness thing on Instagram, but doesn't see like the weeks of, feeling the same way before that. Nice one day, everything came together, went on Instagram, looked good, and then back
Right.
to the regular schedule.
Right. And, on that note too, you see these CrossFitters that are crushing it during their pregnancy in the gym. And, all these women or even men sometimes in the comments saying, wow, that's so dangerous for the baby and all these things. And it's like, you don't know the team that she has behind her that are, giving her the thumbs up to everything that she's doing. You don't know the hours and the hours of training that she did, not only prior, but ramping up into her pregnancy. And then afterwards, probably see them doing muscle ups and pull ups and all these things like a month after pregnancy. And it's like, they have trained for this, they are not like regular people. They are machines. So them doing that versus, the average person that, strength trains 3 to 4 times a week and you cannot even compare because it's not the same at all.
Yeah, and the Olympic lift proficiency is like they're so skilled at those movements that doing them while pregnant is so much safer than probably me doing an
Yeah.
Olympic lift not pregnant.
They can do it in their sleep.
Yeah.
Like so many reps and hours in the gym. And a lot of times, they spend hours in the gym. Whereas like, your regular person is gonna be like, I need to be in and out in an hour. They're in there for hours and hours and days, perfecting their skill and getting stronger. So it's definitely yeah, we can't compare to that.
Definitely not. So when it comes to running, I did have some interesting questions, both like prenatal and postnatal, because running introduces, the pounding on the road, gravity, and especially prenatal, you have a lot more weight in there. So there's a lot of people that discuss, hey, running might be bad for your pelvic floor because there's a lot of weight on it when you're running. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that, and then also getting back to something like running postpartum as well, same things apply. Gravity, pelvic floor, what does that look like for people?
Yeah. So a lot of people shy away from running because, like you mentioned, the impact, right? Like it's a constant beating of your joints and everything, and it's a lot on your body. even if you are familiar with running during pregnancy, you're adding a whole extra load. So a lot of people do shy away from it. But what I will say is that, your pelvic floor is like any other muscle, any other group of muscles. If you want to get them stronger, you have to train them, right? So just like if you wanted to get stronger in your squat, you're going to break down the squat pattern, you're going to regress it, then you're going to progressively overload. So it's the same exact thing with your pelvic floor. I will say, as long as you feel comfortable doing running while you're pregnant, I encourage it. I encourage it until, you absolutely cannot. And it's, but even after, when you're postpartum, if you want to get back into running, you just break down the running pattern. You work on unilateral strength, you work on impact in your joints. There's different exercises that you can do, small jumps, bigger jumps. You jump forward, you jump backwards. There's different plyometric exercises that you can add to your routine to, one, make sure that, again, there's no heaviness or any kind of pelvic floor symptoms that may happen. And if you go for a run and there is something that goes on, then you troubleshoot it. Just like if you go for a run and your knee hurts, what do? You take a step back, you examine the knee, what's going on in the knee. And most of the time it is a underpreparedness issue. It's a strength issue. It's not necessarily that your pelvic floor is destroyed or, something happened. It's just that your body's not ready for it right at this point. So then at that point, we regress, we take a step back and we build, we strengthen the pelvic floor. We go back to all those unilateral exercises. We work on your breathing. We work on your posture. Make sure that your body is ready for all of the impact that comes with running. And then we treat it just like any other thing. If you before were able to run 5 minutes before you started feeling symptoms, okay, we do all the exercises, we do all the PT, and then we try it again. And then at this point, oh, I can run 10 minutes now without any symptom. That's a win because you went from running 5 minutes to running 10 minutes. So I treat it just like I would any other orthopedic condition. And I absolutely encourage it for pregnant women until they just feel uncomfortable doing it. A lot of people just stop because they feel uncomfortable. That extra weight of the belly, it just doesn't feel good. And then at that point, okay, then, you stop running for a little bit, maybe walk instead, do a bike ride, and then we'll get back to it once you're ready postpartum.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sound like it'd be comfortable. When it
Yeah.
comes to when it comes to an analogy here for this next question, people there, there's two ends of the spectrum. One end from a core training perspective would be, you just have to train like isolated core all the time, and then the other end of the spectrum is you never have to train your core, just squat and deadlift heavy, and your core gets stronger because of that. Core being a term that is loosely used here because, as we know, it's most people only think of your abs, but it's definitely a lot more than that. But when it comes to the pelvic floor, where do you sit on that spectrum of like, hey, we need to be isolated training our pelvic floor versus if you just, strength train smartly throughout pregnancy and things, the pelvic floor is going to be strong as well.
I mean, I don't lean one way or the other. I think they're both important.
Well, yeah,
Yes,
the
when you're
truth
doing
is
squats.
somewhere in the middle. I wasn't asking you to take a
Yeah.
side. I was just asking like where you
Ah,
like on the spectrum, like
yes,
where do you
definitely
sit?
in the middle. Yes, in the middle. Yes, definitely you can do isolated core movements, but obviously when you squat with the weight in front of you, you're going to be engaging your core. But as you progress through the pregnancy, targeted specific abdominal muscles training is maybe a little bit harder. So, maybe you're not comfortable doing a sit up, even though it's totally fine. Maybe that position bothers you. Maybe going into a side plank bothers you. So, training specific core muscles later in the end stages of pregnancy may just be uncomfortable. So then we do other things. But definitely just in the middle, they're both important and you can go either way, but you should be doing both.
Right. Yeah. Maybe I should reword this because I definitely liked that question, that answer, but it wasn't necessarily what I meant. But it's on me.
Oh,
No, you're good. That's important. I mean, obviously, the core is impacted by pregnancy, so it's important. But I guess the better way to phrase it would be when you're dealing with somebody's pelvic floor health, like how much are you focusing on isolated pelvic floor exercises versus just generally making somebody stronger overall and focusing
got
on
it.
like a wide range of movement patterns.
Gotcha. Okay. So when that happens, I during the internal assessment that I mentioned earlier, we go through a series of kind of contraction exercises. So I want to see how strong your contraction is. I want to see how long you can hold your contraction. And I want to see, do you have good control? So there's different things that I ask the person to do, that I ask the woman to do in order to find out those different stages. And then during that point, yes, it is very specific. I'm asking you, do a pelvic floor contraction, do a Kegel. How long can you hold it? Can you, kind of relax and contract for a period of time? And then if they're having kind of issues with that, or if they have trouble with that, then we kind of go over, okay, this is what it should feel like. And then I give different analogies and different things that they can start to do to work on that. There's also different tools that I can give them so that they can have, like, if they're more of a visual feedback kind of person, then they can use that. Because the thing with the pelvic floor, you can't see it. So it's kind of hard to tell somebody that this is how it should feel when they can't see what they're doing. When I say contract your bicep, you're going to do this. You see your arm moving. So we know that it's working. With the pelvic floor, it's a little bit different. So if they're not kind of getting that mind muscle connection right away, then we introduce different tools that give you a little bit more feedback. And then uh, at that point, it is going to be more pelvic floor specific. It's going to be a lot of breathing. It's going to be just very specific to that. And then what we want to do is take it from there to different positions, because I don't want to just have you do everything laying down, because we don't live laying down. So then I'll have you do all these different exercises in different positions, side lying, seated, standing, because it is different to do a pelvic floor contraction laying down versus standing up. So I'll take them through that, and then we wanna transfer that, what they've learned with that and those different positions, to then training. So we learn how to contract your pelvic floor, we get that stronger, and then we wanna take it to different exercises and movements that you do on a day-to-day basis, because that's what's gonna be important. Most women don't get symptoms while they're just laying down or standing up. It's when they're squatting, or when they're picking something up, or when they're running and things like that. So we want to make sure that they're good in all of those positions, but definitely starting with a little bit more specific and targeted exercises at first.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. So sorry if my dog is barking.
It's okay.
Do you find that you have anybody come to you, maybe they're early in pregnancy or they're not pregnant yet and they're planning on it, who really are concerned about their sports performance? They love sports. They kind of are worried. They're like, "Yeah, I want to have children, or I'm nearly pregnant, but I also don't want to like sacrifice my long-term ability to enjoy the sports that I do." Do
Mhm.
you hear that concern? And then if somebody was to come to you with that concern, like how would you respond?
Yeah, I don't hear it too often, not necessarily about their sport per se. It's more so about they don't want to lose their strength. They don't want to lose their ability to be able to do their daily activities. So that's what I get most of the time. And what I say is kind of how I said before, you have to honor your body where it is. During pregnancy, your body goes through so many changes so quickly that maybe your sport or your activity or whatever it is that you want to do does take a toll, and it gets, kind of on the back burner, but it doesn't have to be forever. This is just a period of your life. And it may seem like it's so long at first, but the grand scheme of things, it'll be just such a short period that, it may just need to take a pause. And then once you're done giving birth, then we kind of ramp back into whatever it is that you want to do. So if your sport is running and you're worried that you can't run during pregnancy, well, maybe it just doesn't feel good. So you don't do it. And that's totally okay. You can do kind of other things that will prepare you and continue to make you strong, so that when you are postpartum, you can get back into it, not necessarily faster but probably with more ease, and you won't lose any of those basic kind of foundations that you need for running, let's just say. So definitely just try to honor your body where you are right now, and know that this is just a short term period in your life.
That's really good advice. Being mindful of time, is there anything else that you would want to share around pelvic floor health, postnatal health training, or anything? Doesn't have to be related to anything we've talked about.
Yes. So just want to say, that if you're dealing with any kind of pelvic floor issues, whether you've had kids, whether you haven't, find somebody that can help you. There is usually most of the time something that can be done, whether you've had a kid a year ago, whether you've had a kid 5 years ago, whatever the case may be, you don't have to live with these symptoms and you don't have to live, in fear of movement or fear of living your life because you are going through this. Somebody out there can help you, and I just hope that, as time goes on, women get more resources and more information about all of these different things that our bodies go through, not only in pregnancy, but as we get older into menopause. That's a whole other topic. But I just want to say, yes, seek help, find somebody that can help you get back to where you want to get to. And if that person that you reach out to first, you know, can't do it, then reach out to somebody else. But there's something out there, someone out there that can help you, and you don't have to live with where you're at. If you want to get better, if you want to get back to doing something.
With that said, do you work remotely with anybody or are you solely in person?
So I do both remote and in person at Oldville Athletics in Coral Gables. And then I also take on clients remotely.
Good deal. Do you want to kind of plug how people can contact you and I'll put it down in the description?
Yes. So you can email me at Annie, ANY, at oldbullathletics.com. Or you can find me on Instagram at Hughes, HUGHESA03.
Good deal. Again, that'll be in the description for anybody. Thanks for coming on. I had a really good time. As
Thank
always,
you.
did not get through everything I wanted to ask, but that's okay.
Time went by
It
so fast.
happens. It does. It really does. It's like we get on these calls and it's just you blink and it's over.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so
Awesome.
much for
Well,
having me.
yeah, thank you for coming on. And I think people will get a lot from this. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed it, it would be helpful if you could leave a rating or a review on whatever platform you're listening on, as that helps us reach more audiences and get more awesome guests on. If you're interested in anything we talked about today, you can check the show notes for all links. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next podcast.